Celebrations by some in Syria after Bashar al-Assad is toppled, overthrown by opposition forces made up of different factions. There's concern now about what might follow. So, how will Syria be governed, and what impact will it have on the region? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Dareen Abughaida. In an offensive as unexpected as it was swift, the Assad government, which ruled Syria for more than 50 years, was brought to an end in just days. Opposition forces swept through major cities with little or no resistance. The big prize, the capital Damascus, fell without a fight. The Syrian army nowhere to be seen. And those who stood against the Assad government at home and abroad are celebrating. But what's to happen next is unknown. Different opposition fighting groups found unity with the single aim of toppling Assad, but now face the challenges of governing a country and dealing with each other. The strongest, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which split from al-Qaeda, has been designated a terrorist group by the UN, the US, Turkey, and Russia. So, how will Syria be governed? What role will the fighting groups play? And what impact will this have on the region? We'll get to our guest in a moment. First, this report from Katia Lopez-Horayan.
A new chapter in Syria, with people in Damascus and across the country celebrating the end of President Bashar al-Assad's regime. A political dynasty in power for more than half a century seemingly unraveled within days.
We came out to take part in the celebration and celebrate with the world. People were expecting this, the fall of the tyrant. God willing, Syria will come back better than before.
With Assad no longer in the country, the presidential palace, once home to Syria's most powerful man, is now open to everyone. People roam around the compound with no government staff in sight. Syria's prime minister addressed the nation from his home.
We are extending our hands even to the opposition, who extend their hands and gave assurances they will not cause any harm to any citizens.
Several opposition groups with different leaders, interests, and backers were involved in the surprisingly quick offensive. Now many are questioning if new divisions will emerge within this group of fighters who've taken Damascus.
The Syrian army really just melted. There was no money in Damascus to pay troops. People were exhausted. There had not been a peace dividend. Nobody could rebuild their lives. Life looked very grim under this regime going out into the future.
Syrians living in neighboring Turkey, many of them pushed out by Syria's war, celebrated Assad's fall. About 12 million people were displaced in more than a decade of fighting between opposition groups and government forces, with hundreds of thousands killed. Many say the fall of Assad will help heal the scars of war.
This is the happiest day of my life. We are reborn. On this day we rejoice with God's victory.
The internal situation in Syria is still disorganized. Will there truly be security and safety? This phase requires, at the very least, 6 months to a year for any Syrian considering going back.
For years, military support from Russia and Iran helped keep Assad in power. But the wars in Ukraine, Gaza, and Lebanon shifted the attention of both Moscow and Tehran. As celebrations continue for those who opposed Assad, for others there will be worry about what will follow. A range of groups with different aims shared a mission of toppling the regime. Now many in and out of Syria are waiting to see what's next. Katia Lopez-Horayan, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Okay, let's take a look now at how things unfolded in Syria. So as we mentioned, opposition forces led a lightning offensive, taking over regions in the north, including the economic capital of Aleppo, Hama, and then reaching the city of Homs. In the south, local groups took control of the city of Dareen. But the moment the government was toppled was when the capital Damascus fell rapidly and without resistance. Countries across the region will now be monitoring developments closely, each with their own interests in what happens next. We'll now bring in our guest. Joining us from Doha is Ibrahim Olabi, who's a barrister and board member of the Syrian-British Consortium. He's researched and advised extensively on international legal cases related to the conflict in Syria. In London, Hind is a columnist and academic who's also a consulting fellow at the Chatham House think tank. And also here in Doha, Professor Hind Kabawat, who's a director of Interfaith Peacebuilding for World Religions, Diplomacy and Conflict Resolution at the Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution, George Mason University. Welcome to you all. Thanks for your time. Hind, I'll start with you. What will this transition period look like?
Brothers and sisters in Syria, this is a very, very special day. This is the day we get rid of dictators. So I just want to share my happiness, my emotion. This is a great day. Transitions. Today we're celebrating, but tomorrow we're going to start the hard work. Hard work to have a Syria, inclusive Syria, a Syria without sectarianism, Syria with diversity, Syria, democratic Syria. So I can see the young generation are in the streets celebrating, but we know that we have lots of work lying ahead, and we're going to be working together to build our Syria.
It's now that the capital Damascus has obviously fallen, are you any clearer on the opposition group's intention going forward, or will it be weeks or months where the reality of the nature and the intentions of these groups will be clearer then?
I think if you look at the statements shared by those groups, they are sort of all in agreement that they want a joint transitioning body to control the country, at least for the short period coming before elections are able to be held there. However, there are many challenges as to who can participate in forming this transitioning body. If you look at, for example, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, although the group and its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jurani, has been saying that I'm willing to engage and I've changed, the international community as well as regional actors have been skeptical about the real intentions and the change that the group has been trying to project. Now, the real question is, to what extent will regional as well as local actors in Syria be willing to test the genuinity of the statements made by the group? And I think the question to that will then determine, at least in part, what might come next.
Okay, Ibrahim, how much support do these opposition groups do they have internally in Syria?
So I think the first part of this question is, what sort of support did the regime have in that sense? So if we flip the question, and start with the regime. So we have seen in areas that the opposition have come in quite in smooth control, right? No civil resistance, no people picking up the arms and fighting, including in a lot of areas that were fully loyal to the regime and had combatants fighting for the regime. Areas in the suburbs of Hama, and the suburbs of Homs and so on. So the first thing to note is that the regime has tortured its own people, gassed its own people, and forced to disappear its own people, starved its own people, has kind of lost also popular legitimacy. Of course, part of the issue of living in an autocratic government is that you cannot measure in a way which party has more votes, but you can also kind of see what's happening on the ground. Whether a lot of the people are supportive of the opposition and the different factions that are there. We have seen celebrations that they were reunited with their family members, that the prisons are freed. So obviously there is some support, but I think there is also some fears as to what comes next. We have seen and heard reassurances, but we've also seen for the past 10 days and actually a delivery on most of these reassurances so far, and I note so far.
On the point that Haid was just making a moment ago, past comments made by al-Jolani, one of which was back in 2014, he had said that Christians and Alawites would not be accommodated in any Syria. I mean, is there any reason to believe that that view has changed, even though you say that publicly he is making other statements, but do you really believe that view has changed?
I mean, personal belief is very, very subjective, but let's look at the legacy of so far since those statements. So we've seen that he has made those statements in, as you said, in 2014 and 2015, but then he has been trying to interact with also some of the minority groups in Idlib long before this offensive. He used to reject the revolution flag or the Free Syria flag, which I'm wearing today, but then he changed that. So there's actually been a period of, I would say, at least a transformation, at least in part, for some time. So these reassurances did not start 3-4 days ago in terms of public rhetoric. But that said, we're still aware of the legacy that you mentioned. We're aware of what happened prior to 2014. We are aware of a lot of groups that suffered and a lot of people that suffered at the hands of Jolani. But, to comment on the last 10 days, so far, so good in terms of reassurances. Would that stay? We don't know. And that's what we'll be very carefully interacting with and very carefully dealing with and in the period to come.
Okay, let's bring in Hind once again. I mean, you spoke of the importance of inclusivity, Hind, and that's what you're hoping for going forward. But what are the next steps that need to be taken to ensure that there's a new administration and one which ensures inclusivity?
Yeah. First, I just want to add of what my colleague Ibrahim said about outreach to the minority. This morning I was speaking with my church, the Orthodox Church in Syria, and the transition, and there have been the operation there, and they've been very moderate and very understanding. They didn't get to the village. They've been treating the Christian in a very respectful way. Also in Aleppo, my relatives, my friends, the Armenian community, the Christian community. So I know in the past we're careful. We're not 100% sure what will happen, but so far for the last few days, my Christian community, they've been in a good shape. There is no violation in any kind. As a matter of fact, they've been distributing breads and knocking doors and seeing if they need anything. So this is where we're going to stop here. But also I have to say that in Idlib, for the Christian community in the past, yes, the HTS outreach to them, they try to get back to their land, to get them back their land, etc. So this is a very good, positive steps. What we should do now, we shouldn't just relax. We need to keep watching, keep observing, helping, and we want our civil society to be strong on the ground, to keep doing the great initiative they're doing. The last things we want now in Syria to have a sectarian war, and this doesn't look like. People of Syria, they are really being united today.
Hayed, in
this
terms
is something I can tell you I'm a little bit comfortable.
Okay, Hayed, we heard an appeal made by the Special Envoy for Syria, Garrett Peterson, who said that appealing for law and order to be maintained as well as the preservation of public institutions. Are you confident that these opposition groups on the ground can do that? And how critical at this moment, Hayed, is the preservation of public institutions?
Sure, but just before answering that question, I just want to comment on something my fellow Syrian speakers have mentioned. I think there is a difference between giving assurances and protecting minorities, which true, Jolani and HTS did not only do over the past 10 days, but they had a similar sort of approach to minorities in Idlib, especially with a Druze community there. But there is a difference between not attacking or violating the rights of minorities and allowing people to participate in governing their areas and having a say over who does what in their respective communities and areas. And this is the aspect that al-Jolani and HTS has not been able to really deliver on, despite the pro sort of power sharing sort of narrative and discourse the group has been saying, not only over the past 10 days, but over the past few years in the areas that were controlled in northwestern Syria. So I think for a real sort of shot at a genuine transition that will lead to a democratic and diverse future for the country, what's needed is more than just assurances. Now, going to the security situation and ability of different groups to sort of secure the areas, the issue right now is most of the people who talk about the situation in Syria, they are still talking about one operation that has captured the country. But if you look at what happened over the past couple of days, you have one large coalition of groups led by Tahrir Sham who have been fighting in Homs, but then you have local armed groups who started liberating their areas from regime forces and pushing them out, whether that's in Dar'a and Sweda and southern Syria, or even in Damascus. And this is where we have noticed that the violations have been taking place, especially in Damascus, because there is no one unified group that has been able to provide security and prevent violations similar to what we saw in Aleppo. Right after the capture of Aleppo, the Hayat Tahrir Sham and the coalition fighting with it were able to maintain security there because there were a unified group and structure. We did not see that in Damascus, but hopefully in the next few days that will change.
You've raised an important point, and that was going to be my next question, but I'll put it to Ibrahim. Talk to us about the different groups, Ibrahim, because it's not only Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. How many different groups are there right now in these opposition forces, and to what extent do you think their ideologies differ from one another, and whether they have different interests and goals, or are they all aligned?
So as Hind said, building upon what Hind said, the operation that started a couple of weeks ago from Idlib to the west countryside of Aleppo and Tel Hama was made by multiple armed groups, coordinated and led by HTS. But there were many people, many armed groups there that did not belong to HTS, were trained by HTS, but are not part of the organizational structure. But also in terms of the individual fighters, a lot of them were from Aleppo, were from Hama, were from Homs, and that's an important point not to forget. This is a kind of it is Syrian-led in that sense. I mean, ideologically, we'll get to that point in a minute. And then obviously you have the Syrian National Army in the north, which is the army that is backed by Turkey and others. They participated in some of the battles, but so far limited. But then the real game changer, in my opinion, is the fact that the local, some of them former armed groups, took up their arms again in the south and in the southeast, in Sweda, and started participating as well and moving kind of west towards Damascus and north in the situation of Dar'a. So these are not HTS-led or HTS-coordinated. These are kind of former fighters, civilians who took up arms and started kind of taking control of their areas and moving north. So there is a diverse range of armed groups. I would say that they are united in terms of their idea of bringing down the government and bringing down the regime for all its crimes. They're not all ideologically aligned. But I would add to a point that might kind of scare some of the analysts in some of the countries and some of your watchers. But this is the reality that we've been living in Syria since 2013. So it's not a situation that the central government fell and then all these armed groups are going to show up and start fighting each other. That's what's been going on since 2013. Plus a repressive government, plus an autocratic government.
Hind,
so that
Hind, what do you make of this?
Out of the equation, and the situation continues now.
Okay, Hind, what do you make of the different factions and whether there could be internal power struggles within them? How much, how destabilizing could that then be for Syria and for the region as well?
Listen, for us as a civil society women group, we're watching this very carefully, and it's been lots of worry for us. We believe in the non-violence fight and everything, but today there is a reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground, we have two options: or to stay away and watch and get worried, or to be close and try to advise and try to be active on the ground. We are worried about this. And I'm not saying that it is going to be very easy, but It wasn't easy anyway. For the last 13 years, it wasn't easy. We all suffered, our Syrian people, my kid, everybody suffered. So today, we have some difficult time lying ahead, but we're going to work together and be more strategically thinking about how we're going to change. Now, the armed group are there. We are there. As a civil society, we're stronger than before. We know what we want. And just to let the audience know that Arab Spring is not over. Now we see that the security and violence didn't get stability to Syria. Now we have to think about democratic transitions, and and transitional justice. We need to start thinking about transitional justice, about how we get more inclusive dialogue among us. Our Syria, it is not for one group or others. This is a Syria for all.
Okay, Hind, I got to ask you, though, about the region. And shortly after the fall of Damascus, we saw Israeli tanks cross the border fence between Israel and Syria. They entered Quneitra from the occupied Golan Heights. And this is the first time that they've done so since 1974. Also, we understand that they bombed what they say are military depots in the south of the country as well as Damascus. What do you think Israel is end game here? And how are the opposition groups going to deal with this?
It's a very important question, but I don't think anyone has a clear answer to that question yet. Israel has its own expansion ideology and strategy, and there is fear among Syrians that Israel could take advantage of the situation in order to advance and capture new areas in Syria under the pretext of protecting its own border. For now, they have been just signaling that anyone who will get closer to the conflicting lines and violate those lines will be dealt with harshly. Now, we don't know whether there is some sort of back channels between Israel and some of the groups to ensure that the conflicting lines will not be violated. If we go back to a couple of years ago, when opposition groups controlled that area, they had some sort of, at least some of the groups there had contact with Israel and maintained some sort of understanding that did not lead to escalation between the two. So here we have the possibility of, again, reaching some sort of agreement through back channels in order to give them the assurances that they need in order not to expand and basically occupy new territories in Syria. But if that fails, we might see that happening. And I think the role of the international community as well as regional actors will be key here in order to ensure that there will be no escalation on that southern front with Israel.
Ibrahim, of course, Iran and Russia, huge allies of Syria traditionally. What does this mean for that relationship going forward?
Well, it's going to be kind of a nuanced, I think, complicated relationship because they have taken sides. It's not that the Syrian people have decided to, take a side against them. It's them that they've decided to kind of prop up Assad. I mean, we've seen already some of the armed groups, HTS included, that give assurances to Russia that we know no one is going to kind of harm Russian interests. We've seen reassurances on Iranian and Russian consulates. We've also seen withdrawal of a lot of Iranian military advisors and a lot of Iranian presence in Damascus and in Aleppo and in Homs and in other places. It's now the time for really kind of careful politics. I don't think anyone is in the business of antagonizing any party that could further destabilize Syria. We need to focus on what's next. We need to focus on accountability for the crimes. We need to focus on all the kind of transitional efforts, political and from a human rights perspective. And we need to now start working towards the Syria we all once dreamed of, a Syria that is free from tyranny,
a lot of discussions to be had.
Represents us all. And,
You're right, a lot of discussions to be had.
Today.
Yeah, but these regional implications are also quite important. Hind, I'll just come over to you. Just talk to us about Lebanon and Iraq now and the impact potentially on those countries. And Lebanon, of course, when it comes to the resistance, Syria was a major lifeline for the resistance in Lebanon. What happens next?
No, what happened? Lebanon, actually, it is being very sensitive. But today, The Lebanese people are celebrating in the street for the Syrian victory. So our Lebanese people there, and they're being relieved by all what's happening. Now we have to be careful. But I want to emphasize that we need to keep dialogue with everybody. We cannot close any doors. Diplomacy is diplomacy. We need the help of everybody, internationals and regional powers, to help
when
our
you say you need the help of everybody, when you look at the regional options, Hind, when you say you need the help of everybody, what country, in your opinion, from the region or perhaps outside the region, should step in now to play a constructive role going forward?
First, I just want to keep the Syrian-owned and Syrian-led process. I want to be Syrian. This is my priority, and this is what I want. And for me, we won't never, ever forget who are the countries who stood by us in the past. And they are the one, I'm grateful to them. We're all thank them, because when everybody abandoned us and they didn't think that we're going to be where we are today, they did believe in us and they stood by us. And we have a list of countries, especially where I am today here, Qatar. And we thank them, we thank Turkey, we thank the EU, we thank everybody. But the most important things today, we want the help and support to build Syria.
Let me just jump in there for the sake of time. My apologies, but hey, it's final thoughts from you on Turkey.
The refugees to go back, the refugees, they need to go back,
Okay, Hayed, final thought from you on Turkey. Hind just mentioning Turkey. What do you see as Turkey's role going forward, and how involved has Turkey been in all these recent developments?
Well, Turkey will definitely be a key player moving forward for different reasons. Turkey maintains strong ties with different armed groups on the ground. Turkey also has strong ties with the political opposition entities and representatives, most of which are based in Turkey. Also has good allies or relations with allies in the region, as well as international reach. And I think many people, whether from the region or elsewhere, will try to reach out to Turkey in order to play a key role in at least bringing group together, using its influence in order to make sure that the transitioning period will be as peaceful as possible. However, it's not clear whether Turkey will be able to play that role again if key of the questions that we talked about, especially in relation to the engagement with HTS and al-Julani, then that will complicate Turkey's role, because Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a sanctioned entity and is listed as a terrorist organization.
Thank you so much. We've run out of time, but thank you so much for joining us. Ibrahim, Olabi, Hayed, and Hind Kabawat. We appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Join the conversation on X. Our handle is AJ Inside Story. From myself and the entire team here, thanks for watching. Bye-bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.